Marcus.
To Marcus.
Marcus? I'm sorry, who is this?
She used to help out at home. She's not anyone important.
Oh, my mistake.
She sacrificed everything for her son's future, never imagining that one day he'd be ashamed to call her his mother. Diane Whitfield was 29 years old when her husband packed 2 suitcases and left without much explanation. Marcus was 11. For the first few months, she told herself things would stabilize. They didn't. The child support checks came late, then irregularly, then not at all. She picked up shifts at a diner, then a second job cleaning offices at night. Still, by the time Marcus turned 16, they were 3 months behind on rent, and the letter on the kitchen table wasn't the first eviction warning they'd received. That was the night Marcus, sitting across from her at the kitchen table, said the thing that changed everything. "I want to be a lawyer," he said quietly, almost apologetically, like he expected her to laugh or tell him to be realistic. "I know it's a long way off. I know we don't have money for it. I think about it a lot." Diane looked at her son, at the exhaustion already forming under his 16-year-old eyes, exhaustion that shouldn't belong to a boy that young, and she made a decision in that instant that she never once reconsidered for the next 15 years. "Then you will be," she said. "I don't know how yet, but you will be." The next morning, she answered a newspaper ad for a delivery driver at Holloway Regional Produce. The job paid more than the diner, but it meant 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, hauling crates in and out of a truck that had clearly seen better decades, a faded, rust-spotted 2003 Ford with a passenger door that never quite latched right and had to be held shut with a bungee cord looped through the window. She drove that truck for the next 15 years. She never dated seriously again. There wasn't time, and she told herself she didn't miss it, though some nights, alone in the cab eating a sandwich during her lunch break, she wondered what her life might have looked like if things had gone differently. She never took a vacation. Every spare dollar went into a manila envelope she kept taped inside a kitchen cabinet, labeled in her own handwriting, "Marcus, School." Montage sequence. Diane loading crates onto the truck at 5 a.m. while the sky is still dark. Diane eating alone in the cab, engine running for the heat. Marcus, at 14, doing homework at the kitchen table under a single bulb, oblivious at first to how much his mother was sacrificing quietly in the background. When Marcus got his acceptance letter to a state university with a partial scholarship, Diane read the letter twice, went out to the truck, and cried for almost 10 minutes before she trusted herself to walk back inside and tell him the news with a steady voice. It wasn't sadness. It was something closer to disbelief. Relief that maybe, just maybe, this impossible plan she'd built with no real blueprint was actually going to work. When Marcus later got into law school, a harder, more expensive, far less certain path, Diane didn't hesitate. She started taking on more delivery routes, sometimes skipping her own lunch to save gas money. She discovered a small used bookstore 20 minutes out of her normal route and began stopping there once a week, buying secondhand study guides and case law textbooks whenever she'd saved enough, wrapping them in brown paper like gifts before mailing them to his dorm. She never once complained to him about the hours, the exhaustion, the strain on her back from years of lifting crates. She never once asked for anything in return. As far as she was concerned, her son's success was the only return she needed. Marcus met Elena during his second year of law school at a networking mixer he'd almost skipped because he couldn't afford the semi-formal attire everyone else seemed to have without thinking twice about it. Elena's family was old money in the quiet, understated way that old money often is. A father, Richard, who ran a private equity firm with holdings across 3 states, a mother active in the city's charity gala circuit, a childhood spent between a lake house and a private school Marcus had never even heard of before meeting her. From the beginning, Marcus never told Elena an outright lie about his mother. He simply chose a mission, again and again, until a mission became its own kind of architecture, holding up a version of himself he built brick by brick. "Tell me about your family," Elena had asked early on, genuinely curious, no judgment in her voice at all. "It's just me and my mom," Marcus said. "She works a regular job. Nothing exciting." He changed the subject quickly, and Elena, sensing something guarded, didn't push. He told himself, in the quiet moments when guilt crept in, that it wasn't dishonesty, just privacy, just a boundary. But the truth sat heavier than that, and some nights he knew it. The truth was that Marcus had spent years constructing a version of himself calibrated precisely for rooms like the ones Elena's family moved through so effortlessly. He'd paid for his own diction coaching sessions with money he could barely spare, mimicking the unhurried, confident cadence of his wealthier classmates. He bought 2 second-hand suits and had them tailored meticulously so they read as bespoke. He'd learned which wines to order without needing the list, which forks belonged to which course, how to laugh at jokes about vacation homes he'd never been near. He was terrified, genuinely, physically terrified, that if Elena's parents ever saw where he truly came from, the version of himself he'd built, along with everything attached to it, would collapse instantly. When Richard offered, almost casually over dinner one evening, to introduce Marcus to a few partners at his firm, Marcus said yes before the sentence had even finished, gratitude and dread tangled together in his chest. Diane, 300 miles away, knew none of this. She knew only that her son was thriving, Dean's List, then a coveted summer associate position, then an engagement to a woman who, from the photos Marcus occasionally sent, seemed kind and lovely. Diane never once asked to meet Elena's parents. She trusted her son's judgment completely, the same way she'd trusted the plan she made at that kitchen table 15 years earlier. Without demanding proof, without needing thanks. Marcus passed the bar exam with one of the highest scores in his graduating class. Elena's parents, delighted and eager to celebrate, insisted on hosting a dinner in his honor at their country club, the same club where Richard had, 20 years earlier, first been invited as a guest rather than a member. Diane found out about the celebration from an Instagram post, a photo of Marcus in a new suit, captioned, "Officially a lawyer party popper," nearly 6 hours after it had already gone up. Marcus hadn't called her directly. He told himself he'd get to it, that he'd call once the dinner was over, that there simply hadn't been a good moment. Diane wasn't hurt, or at least she told herself she wasn't. He's busy, she reasoned. He's overwhelmed. This is his moment. But she couldn't just sit at home either. She'd been saving something for exactly this occasion, his late grandfather's pocket watch, restored at a small jeweler's shop over the course of several paychecks, the glass replaced, the brass polished back to a soft gleam. She'd been waiting for the right moment to give it to him. She decided on impulse to drive out and surprise him in person. It was a 90-minute drive after a full shift. She was still in her uniform. She hadn't had time to go home and change, and honestly, it hadn't occurred to her that it would matter. She'd worn that uniform to every important moment of Marcus's life so far. Why would tonight be different? She parked the truck awkwardly among a row of luxury sedans, smoothed down her uniform in the reflection of the window, gathered the small wrapped gift, and walked toward the warm glow of the club's entrance, her heart racing with a kind of pride that doesn't need an audience to feel complete. She walked into the private dining room exactly as Richard raised his glass in a toast. Diane sat alone in the truck in the country club's parking lot for nearly 20 minutes before she trusted herself to turn the key. The watch, still carefully wrapped, sat untouched in her lap. She didn't cry right away. She simply stared through the windshield at nothing in particular, replaying the sentence on a loop, unable to stop it. She's not anyone important. 15 years. 12-hour shifts. A bungee cord holding a truck door shut. A manila envelope filled $1 at a time. All of it compressed, apparently, into a single sentence spoken in front of strangers who would forget her by morning, while she would carry those words for the rest of her life. Inside, Marcus had frozen for only a second or two after she left before pushing back from the table, muttering an apology to the stunned guests and half-running toward the entrance. By the time he reached the parking lot, scanning frantically between rows of parked cars, her truck was already gone, taillights disappearing down the winding club driveway. He called her 4 times that night. Each call rang out, then went to voicemail. He didn't leave a message on any of them. He didn't know what words could possibly undo what he'd already said. Elena found him standing alone in the parking lot, arms crossed against the cold, and asked quietly, "Marcus, who was that?" He didn't answer her directly that night either. 3 days passed. Marcus barely slept, replaying the moment obsessively, rehearsing apologies he wasn't sure his mother would ever want to hear. On the 4th day, his phone rang, not his mother's number, but Richard's. "Marcus," Richard said, his voice measured, unreadable. "Can you come by my office? I'd like to speak with you privately." Marcus arrived expecting, at best, an awkward conversation about wedding logistics and, at worst, a quiet ultimatum about his future at the firm. What he got instead was neither. Richard's office was quiet, wood-paneled, lined with photographs of his career, ribbon cuttings, handshakes, framed magazine profiles. He gestured for Marcus to sit, then, without much preamble, slid an old, slightly faded photograph across the desk. Marcus looked down. A boy, no older than 12, stood beside a woman in a delivery uniform next to a familiar-looking truck parked outside a small roadside diner. "I recognized her the moment she walked into that dining room," Richard said quietly. "It took me a few seconds. Then it hit me all at once." He tapped the photograph. "That's me. 12 years old. That diner belonged to my mother, before any of this." He gestured vaguely around the office, at the framed accolades, the view of the skyline. "We were barely keeping the lights on some months. Your mother used to deliver our produce order every Tuesday. More than once, when we were short on the invoice, she'd quietly slip in extra crates anyway and mark it paid in full. She never once mentioned it, never asked my mother to pay her back. I only found out years later, when my mother told me the truth before she passed." Marcus stared at the photo, unable to speak. "I built everything I have," Richard continued, his voice steady but pointed, "because people like your mother chose decency when they had absolutely nothing to gain from it. And 3 nights ago, in my own dining room, I watched you tell a room full of strangers that she was nobody." The silence that followed felt longer than it was. "I'm not telling you this to shame you further," Richard added, more gently now. "I'm telling you because I think you've forgotten something important. The same thing I nearly forgot, more than once on my way up. Success doesn't erase where you came from. It just gives you more room to either honor it or bury it. You chose to bury it. You still have time to choose differently." Marcus drove straight to his mother's house that same night, the photograph still folded carefully in his jacket pocket. She didn't answer the door right away. When she finally opened it, just partway, arms crossed, her expression was guarded in a way he'd never seen directed at him before. "I don't have anything to say to you tonight, Marcus," she said quietly. "I know," he said. "You don't have to say anything. I just need you to hear this." She didn't close the door. "I was ashamed of the wrong thing," he said, his voice unsteady. "I spent years thinking I was protecting myself from being seen as someone who came from nothing. But I was never actually ashamed of you. I was ashamed of what I imagined other people would think of you, and that fear made me do something unforgivable. I know sorry doesn't undo it. I just need you to know I understand exactly what I did, and I'm not going to pretend it was smaller than it was." Diane was quiet for a long moment, studying his face the way she used to when he was a child trying to explain a broken window or a missed curfew, searching for whether the truth was actually being told this time. "I didn't drive that truck for 15 years so you could stand in a room and pretend I don't exist," she finally said, her voice low, controlled, carrying the weight of every unspoken sacrifice at once. I did it so you'd have the freedom to become anyone you wanted to become. I just never imagined anyone would include someone who'd be embarrassed of me in front of strangers. You're right, Marcus said. There's no version of an apology that fixes that. I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight. I just didn't want another day to pass with you thinking I don't understand what I took from you. She didn't invite him inside that night, but she didn't close the door either. Eventually, she stepped out onto the porch instead, and they sat together on the steps in silence, the porch light humming softly above them, for nearly an hour, the first unhurried, unstaged time they'd spent together in years. Elena learned the full truth a few days later, not from Marcus's excuses, but from Richard, who felt she deserved honesty even if Marcus hadn't offered it himself. She didn't end the engagement out of anger at Diane, or even entirely because of the incident itself. She ended it because of what the years of careful omission revealed about the person Marcus had quietly chosen to become, someone willing to erase the people who loved him most in order to be accepted by people who barely knew him at all. I don't think you lied to me about your mother, Elena told him, calm and clear-eyed, the ring already set down on the table between them. I think you lied to yourself about who you wanted to be. I can't build a life with someone who's still deciding that. Months passed. Slowly, carefully, Marcus began showing up at his mother's house again. Not on holidays staged for optics, not with gifts meant to compensate, but on ordinary Sunday afternoons, with nothing to prove and no image left to protect. The old truck still sat in the driveway, exactly where it always had. Marcus stopped seeing it as something to be embarrassed by and started seeing it for what it had always actually been. 15 years of quiet, relentless love, parked in plain sight the whole time. Sometimes the people who gave up the most for us are the easiest to overlook until we almost lose them for good. Red Heart, what would you have done in Marcus's position? Let us know in the comments.